Hi, I don't know if you'll believe this story, but it's one I've carried with me for years. It's about family, betrayal, and revenge. The kind of revenge that's sweet because it's deserved. It's about my older sister Rebecca and the wedding she tried to ruin, and how in the end, my husband and I gave her exactly what she had coming. Rebecca has always been the favorite. Growing up, she was the golden child. Beautiful, talented, the one everyone adored. Our parents doted on her, showering her with love and praise while I stood in the background unnoticed. She could do no wrong in their eyes, and anything I achieved was always compared to her. If I got an A, Rebecca would have gotten an A+. If I made the school soccer team, Rebecca would have been the captain. I learned early on that no matter how hard I tried, I would always be second best. It was easier just to stay quiet, to let her have the spotlight. I tried to carve out a life for myself outside of her shadow, friends, hobbies, dreams that were my own, and for a while, it worked. I met Daniel when I was 25, and he was the best thing that ever happened to me. He was kind, funny, and he loved me in a way that made me feel seen for the first time in my life. We got engaged after 2 years of dating, and I was happier than I had ever been, but Rebecca couldn't stand it. I think it drove her crazy to see me happy, to see me have something she didn't. She had always been the one to get everything first, the attention, the accolades, the boyfriends. And now, here I was, planning a wedding, and she couldn't handle it. The first sign that something was wrong came at our engagement party. My parents had insisted on hosting it at their house, and I agreed, hoping maybe this would be a chance for us all to come together, to celebrate something good. Rebecca showed up late, her entrance grand and attention-grabbing as always. She was dressed in a tight red dress that left little to the imagination, her makeup immaculate. She made a beeline for Daniel, ignoring me completely, her laughter loud as she touched his arm, leaned in close. "You sure you want to marry my sister?" she asked him, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "You know she's always been a bit of a mess, right?" Daniel just smiled politely, gently stepping away from her. "I think she's perfect," he said, his eyes meeting mine across the room, giving me a wink. Rebecca's smile faltered, and for a moment, I saw the hatred in her eyes. She quickly masked it, turning away with a laugh, but I knew that she couldn't stand seeing me happy. The next few months were a nightmare. Rebecca was everywhere, always inserting herself into the wedding planning, offering her advice that was really just thinly veiled criticism. "You're wearing that dress?" she'd say, her nose wrinkling. "I guess it's fine, if that's what you want." She convinced our parents to side with her on every decision, making me feel like a guest at my own wedding. Then, 3 weeks before the wedding, Rebecca dropped the bomb. She was pregnant. I remember the way she announced it, her voice loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. We were at my parents' house, going over the guest list, when she stood up, a hand on her stomach, her eyes glistening with fake tears. "I just have some wonderful news," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm pregnant! Isn't it amazing?" My mother gasped, rushing over to hug her, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Rebecca, that's wonderful! We're going to be grandparents!" My father beamed, pulling her into a hug. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart." And just like that, the attention shifted. My wedding was forgotten, overshadowed by Rebecca's news. She smiled at me over my mother's shoulder, her eyes cold and triumphant, and I knew she had planned this. She had timed it perfectly, making sure that my day would be all about her. I tried to stay calm, tried to focus on what mattered: Daniel, our love, the life we were building together. But Rebecca wasn't done. She started dropping hints, little comments that were meant to undermine me. "You know," she said one day, her voice casual, "a lot of marriages end in divorce, especially when one partner isn't really ready for the commitment." She looked at me, her smile sweet. "I just hope you know what you're doing." My parents, of course, took her side. They were thrilled about the baby, and every conversation seemed to revolve around Rebecca and her pregnancy. "Are you sure you want to go through with the wedding?" my mother asked me one evening, her voice gentle. "I mean, with everything going on with Rebecca, maybe it would be better to postpone?" I was furious. This was my wedding, my day, and once again, Rebecca was trying to take it away from me, but I refused to let her win. I smiled, nodding politely, and told my mother that the wedding was going ahead as planned. I wasn't going to let Rebecca ruin this for me. The day of the wedding arrived, and I was determined to make it perfect. I had spent months planning every detail, making sure that everything was just right. But of course, Rebecca had one last trick up her sleeve. She showed up at the church in a white dress. I couldn't believe it. She walked in, her stomach barely showing, but her dress was tight, clinging to her curves. She smiled at the guests, waving as she made her way to the front row, where my parents were sitting. My mother beamed at her, pulling her into a hug, while my father patted her on the back, congratulating her once again on the baby. I felt a surge of anger, my hands trembling as I stood at the back of the church, waiting to walk down the aisle. Daniel was by my side, his hand on my arm, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay?" he whispered, his voice soft. I took a deep breath, nodding. "I'm fine," I said, my voice steady. "Let's do this." The ceremony went off without a hitch, despite Rebecca's best efforts. I kept my focus on Daniel, on the love we shared, and for a moment, I forgot about her. I forgot about the dress, the pregnancy, the way she had tried to take everything from me. In that moment, it was just me and him, and nothing else mattered. But as soon as the ceremony was over, Rebecca was back at it. She made a toast at the reception, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she talked about how proud she was of me, how she hoped I was ready for the challenges of marriage. She winked at Daniel, her smile sly, and I could see the way my parents hung on her every word, nodding along as if she were some kind of oracle. I had had enough. That night, after the reception was over and the guests had gone home, Daniel and I sat in our hotel room, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. He looked at me, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft. I shook my head, the tears finally spilling over. "No," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm not okay. She's been trying to ruin this for me from the start, and I'm so tired of it. I'm tired of her, of my parents, of all of it." Daniel took my hand, his grip gentle. "Then let's do something about it," he said, his voice steady. "Let's make sure she never does this to you again." I looked at him, my heart pounding. "What do you mean?" He smiled, a cold, determined smile. "I think it's time we showed Rebecca that actions have consequences, that she can't keep treating you like this and expect to get away with it." And that's when we started planning our revenge. The first step was gathering information. Rebecca had always been careful, always making sure to keep her reputation spotless. But everyone has secrets, and Daniel was determined to find hers. He spent weeks digging, using every contact he had, every resource at his disposal, and eventually, he found it. It turned out that Rebecca's perfect life wasn't so perfect after all. The father of her baby wasn't her boyfriend. In fact, she didn't even have a boyfriend. The father was a married man, someone she had been seeing on the side, someone who had no intention of leaving his wife for her. It was the kind of scandal that would ruin her, that would turn our parents against her, that would make everyone see her for who she really was. We waited until the right moment. It was a family dinner a few weeks after the wedding. My parents had invited us over, and of course, Rebecca was there, basking in the attention as she talked about her pregnancy, about how excited she was to be a mother. Daniel and I exchanged a look, and I nodded, my heart pounding as I stood up, clearing my throat. "Actually, I have something I'd like to say," I said, my voice steady. Everyone turned to look at me, my parents smiling, Rebecca's eyes narrowing slightly. "What is it, dear?" my mother asked, her voice sweet. I took a deep breath, my eyes locked on Rebecca. "I think it's time we all knew the truth," I said. "The truth about Rebecca's pregnancy." Rebecca's face went pale, her eyes widening. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice shaky. Daniel stood up beside me, a stack of papers in his hand. "We know who the father is, Rebecca," he said, his voice calm, "and it's not who you've been telling everyone it is." My mother gasped, her eyes darting between us and Rebecca. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniel handed her the papers, copies of text messages, photos, everything we had found. "The father is a married man," he said, his voice cold. "Someone who has no intention of being a part of Rebecca's life or the baby's. She's been lying to all of you." Rebecca stood up, her face flushed, her hands trembling. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice rising. "This is none of your business." I shook my head, my eyes locked on hers. "You made it our business when you tried to ruin my wedding," I said, my voice steady. "You've spent your whole life trying to take everything from me, and I'm done letting you get away with it." My father looked at Rebecca, his face pale, his eyes filled with disappointment. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Rebecca opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked around the room, her eyes wild, and for the first time in my life, I saw her for what she really was: weak, desperate, a liar, who had built her life on the backs of others. "Get out," my mother said, her voice shaking. "I can't even look at you right now." Rebecca looked at me, her eyes filled with hatred. "You'll pay for this," she hissed, her voice low. I smiled, a sense of calm washing over me. "No, Rebecca," I said. "I think it's finally time you paid for everything you've done." She left, slamming the door behind her, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. Free from her shadow, from her cruelty, from the weight of always being second best. In the weeks that followed, the truth about Rebecca spread. The man she had been seeing wanted nothing to do with her, and without the support of our parents, she was left on her own. I heard through the grapevine that she had moved to a small apartment across town, that she was struggling to make ends meet. Part of me felt sorry for her, but I knew she had brought this on herself. Daniel and I focused on building our life together, but we knew that Rebecca was not the type to back down easily. She was wounded, and a wounded animal is often the most dangerous. We needed to be prepared. One day, we got a call from a friend of Daniel's, someone who worked in finance and had been keeping an eye on Rebecca's situation. "You might want to take a look at this," he said, his voice filled with concern. "Rebecca's in trouble. She's racked up a ton of debt, and it looks like she's been using some shady loans to try and get by." Daniel and I exchanged a look. It wasn't enough for Rebecca to be humiliated. She needed to understand the real consequences of her actions, and it seemed like she was about to learn that lesson the hard way. We decided to pay her a visit. We drove to her apartment, a rundown building in a less than ideal part of town. It was a stark contrast to the life she had once lived, the beautiful house she had shared with our parents, the luxurious clothes and vacations she had always flaunted. Now she was living in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, her dreams of grandeur reduced to nothing. When she opened the door, she looked like a shadow of her former self. Her hair was unkempt, her face pale, and the fire that had always burned in her eyes was gone. She looked at us with a mix of surprise and suspicion, her eyes narrowing. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We want to talk, Rebecca," he said. "We want to help you, but you need to understand that this is the end of the line. No more games, no more lies." Rebecca scoffed, her lips curling into a bitter smile. "Help me? After everything you did to me? You ruined my life!" I shook my head, stepping closer. "No, Rebecca," I said softly. "You ruined your own life. We just exposed the truth. You spent years trying to tear me down, trying to take everything I had. And now, look where it's gotten you." For a moment, Rebecca was silent, her eyes glistening with tears. She looked away, her shoulders slumping. "I never wanted it to end like this," she whispered. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to be loved." I felt a pang of sympathy, but I pushed it aside. "You could have been," I said, "but instead of being happy for me, instead of letting me have my moment, you tried to destroy it. You made your choices, Rebecca, and now you have to live with them." Daniel reached into his pocket, pulling out an envelope. "We're willing to help you get back on your feet," he said, handing it to her. "This is enough to cover your debts, to give you a fresh start. But this is it. There are no more chances after this." Rebecca took the envelope, her hands trembling. She looked up at us, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and resentment. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel looked at me, then back at her. "Because we're not like you, Rebecca," he said. "We don't want to see you suffer. We want you to learn, to grow, to be better. But you have to want that too." For a long moment, Rebecca didn't say anything. She just stood there, staring at the envelope in her hands. Finally, she nodded. her voice breaking as she spoke. "I'll try," she said. "I'll try to be better." We left her then, the door closing behind us with a soft click. As we walked away, I felt a sense of closure, a weight lifting off my shoulders. For years, I had carried the burden of Rebecca's cruelty, the constant comparison, the feeling of never being enough. But now, I was free to live my life, to love Daniel, to build a future without the shadow of my sister looming over me. Months passed, and life slowly returned to normal. Daniel and I focused on building our future, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly living for myself. We bought a house, a cozy little place on the outskirts of town, and filled it with love and laughter. We made new memories, ones that weren't tainted by the past, and I finally felt at peace. Rebecca kept her distance. I heard from our parents that she had moved to a new city, that she was trying to start over. I hoped she would find what she was looking for, that she would learn from her mistakes and become the person I always wished she could be. But I knew that her journey was her own, and it wasn't my responsibility to save her. One day, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Rebecca. I hesitated before opening it, not sure if I wanted to read whatever she had to say, but curiosity got the better of me, and I unfolded the paper. "Dear Emily, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I don't expect you to ever truly forgive me for everything I've done. But I wanted to say that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the way I treated you, for the pain I caused. I realize now that I was wrong, that I let my jealousy and my own insecurities destroy the one relationship that should have mattered most, my relationship with you. I'm trying to be better. I've started therapy, and I'm working on myself. It's not easy, and there are days when I feel like giving up. But I want you to know that I'm trying, and that's because of you. You showed me that I can't keep running from my mistakes, that I have to face them if I ever want to move forward. I don't expect us to ever be close again, but I hope that someday we can be in the same room without all the anger and resentment. I hope that someday you can see that I'm trying to change. Thank you for giving me the chance to start over. Love, Rebecca." I read the letter twice, the words sinking in. For so long, I had dreamed of this moment, of Rebecca finally realizing the pain she had caused, finally apologizing. And now that it was here, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us to find some kind of peace. I folded the letter and put it away, not because I wanted to hold on to the past, but because it was a